The Unrelating podcasts are meant to be for education and entertainment. They don't constitute a service or advice. For personal struggles, please reach out to a medical or mental health professional.
Welcome to Unrelating with Kellie and Michelle, and I'm one of your hosts, Kellie. With me is my co-host, Michelle, a licensed marriage and family therapist who's been providing individual and couples therapy for over a decade. Together, we'll explore how we engage in relationships, why we do what we do, and what causes people to unrelate. Hi, everybody. Because it's the Christmas holiday and we're in a giving mood, today we've gift wrapped a special best of episode with some of the most engaging moments from Unrelating thus far. There are 5 segments total with a quick introduction before each one. First up, Jason discusses the challenges of connecting and maintaining his male friendships. This is one episode I particularly liked and connected with, so please enjoy.
I want to go back to something you said about how hard it is for guys to make friendships later in life. And I think there's 2 reasons I see for that. And one is that so much of male friendships are predicated on shooting the shit about old stuff, bringing up old memories. Remember when we were, did this and did that. And it's a lot of like nostalgia and swapping stories about how crazy you were. And you can't do that with someone you don't have a history with. So that's difficult. And then the other thing is that men tend to find emotions messy, or, the message for them is, protect, don't show feelings. And so when you can't be vulnerable with another person, it's almost impossible to find intimacy with another person. And so when you are a stranger to another male and you're trying to connect on some level, it's so much harder to get there. Because it's so much higher stakes for men to just put themselves out there. And I think that's protection mode.
Something that I've experienced recently is guys don't really want to talk about how they're hurting, which I think you that's what you were saying with like emotionally. Yeah. And that's affected my friendships I do have. I've had friends who I know they're hurting, like everyone around them is saying that they're hurting, that they're changing, and they don't want to talk about it. And it's a fine line I know I have to walk, because I know when they're talking with me, they don't want to think about that. They want to be like, talk about stuff that takes their mind off of that, when I want to talk about that. And I know if I talk about that, I'm gonna lose them. That they're gonna be like, well, all Jason wants to talk about is how I'm hurting, and I want to talk about everything else. And I know look, I'm not jealous of my wife that her friends like talking about how they hurt, because that stuff sucks. It's hard to hear. It's hard to talk about. But at the same time, I especially with everything I've gone through recently, there's also that doubt in the back of your mind. Like, do they not want to talk about this because they don't trust me enough, or they don't feel close enough with me? And it also goes back to the everyday thing, because if I'm going to hiking with them on a regular basis, or playing basketball with them, or just like you said, shooting the shit about things that used to be, right, maybe it would just organically come about, them talking about, what, I am having a really hard time, and I'm having a hard time talking about it. But I see and I talk to these people so little. Yeah, we talk through text, but you're not going to just text someone and be like, I'm having a breakdown. That's, some people do that, I guess, but I don't have personal experience with hearing or saying that. That's another thing where, if you have an everyday relationship with people, maybe you do find those opportunities, but they just don't exist with me right now. So that's another thing. Like, I don't feel like I'm being a good friend to the friends I do have sometimes. And that's its own weight that I feel like I'm carrying.
The question would be, what does it mean to be a good friend? Would it be to like really make them see that they're having a hard time? Or, with women, this in Los Angeles, we have this thing with women where it's like, someone gets a lot of Botox and you're like, why aren't her friends telling her she looks terrible? Like, they're not being good friends. But then you get into a situation where that's you and you're like, it looks great. You look great. You look so refreshed. And it's so hard in the moment to be the friend they need versus the friend they want. I don't know if either of you could speak to that on the male side. Men fight the friend they need more than women do.
I mean, I look very young for my age. It started being pointed out when we all turned 30, which is when like I've always had this theory that certain people look good at certain ages, right? And you don't want to be the person who looked their best when you were early high school. Like you just
Right.
don't. You want to be the person who looks their best in their 40s because that shit carries into your 60s.
Yeah.
But
You want to peak early, right?
yeah, right. So for the people who peaked in college, right? 30 is when things really start to go sideways for guys. Like you start putting on weight that you can't lose, and or your hair starts to recede, or you have certain injuries that just like now they're there. Like, you used to be able to play golf, but now that shoulder injury that you're not playing golf ever again. That kind of thing. Or if you do, you're not going to be able to play 72 holes. You're playing 18. Like I've definitely noticed that guys they try to get in front of it. They're like, you see a guy who's clearly gained some weight, and who's going to bring up, oh, you gained some weight? Like I mean, that's not why we're friends. That's not why you exist. That's not why we're together. But then boom, like as soon as they walk right in the door and they see you, like, yeah, I know I gained some weight, or they'll make some joke about it. And like, I don't know what you say at that point. Be like, yeah, you tubby son of a bitch. Like, I don't know. I don't know what you do. Like, I don't know if you lean into that or if you try to console them, be like, look, man, it's not that bad. Like you said with the Botox, be like, look, like, yeah, you gained a little bit of weight, but man, it's not as bad as you think.
You said something earlier that kind of sparked a thought in my brain. You get what you give, right? And for me, I sometimes question if I'm giving enough to get it back, and that's on me because I don't think I reach out enough to my friends as well as I could, and then that consequently maybe I don't hear from them, and I feel like I gotta meet them halfway, and I'm not doing that myself because I get so busy and whatever. And it's funny. I look at my father-in-law, and he is the most jovial guy you'll ever see, and he has so many friends, and he is I mean, he's always talking on the phone with his buddies, and he's playing golf every Thursday, and I look at him and he's such a model for what I want to be with my guy friends as I get older. Because I can imagine he must have 20 friends. I mean, I don't know how many friends they have, but anyway, I see that and I'm like, that's the guy I want to be when I'm in my 60s and 70s. But again, it goes back to like, am I putting Kellie, am I putting the effort forward enough to have those relationships? Because I don't think I am, and I feel like kind of like a jackass and a hypocrite in some ways, but I think, it goes both ways, right? Is that kind of how you feel sometimes too?
I 100% feel that way. I feel that. So when my friend group here disintegrated, I looked at myself and I asked, am I putting in a real effort, or am I just saying that and really I wasn't that type of friend? Because I don't blame anybody for the disintegration of that friendship. They could have just as much thought, well, you know, Jason doesn't put in this kind of effort. I don't, you had to play triage with your friends at that point, right? You had to be like, I have to spend the time with the people that matter to me the most. And they're like, well, Jason's doing his thing. He's not in my orbit as much as these other people. And, when that orbit becomes a little smaller, then you start to think about other things, right? So that made me think a lot about how I don't reach out as much as I should to my friends that I have. And I don't talk to the friends I really cherish as much as I should.
Next up, Kellie talked with Unrelating about her relationship with her daughter and how that's evolved over the years, both good and bad.
I'm curious because I noticed this in my own mother is that, as she got older, she started to be curious with me of like, well, did you not like being a latchkey or like an after school kid, or did I work too much? Or so you start thinking about things maybe you regret as a mother to a daughter. I'm just curious, in those rough times, something I work with my clients in practice is, if a relationship ends, think about what you would regret that you did in that relationship.
Right.
Kind of a postmortem. So I want to pose that question to you as well as you're thinking, like, are there regrets that you have? And do you think that there's a benefit to having a conversation about those with her?
Oh, definitely. I feel like we could have a conversation about it. Some things that I've regretted that I brought up to her, you do find out that it was like, oh, it was no big deal. But I still might have my opinion about it. My biggest regret so far is that we did not have enough playtime together, and we didn't really find playtime or cuddle time. I was too task focused. Our life was too busy. American culture, you keep your kids in this activity and you're exhausted. And you just don't realize that you haven't been there. And then when they get to that stage where they push you away, which is normal, healthy, they should be doing it. There's nothing wrong with that. She was never a kid in trouble. And we got her in the right activities. She was pretty much a happy kid, but we were just, you get pushed to the side. Then you feel like you lost a window of opportunity. I think that happened after we stopped doing bedtime stories. And what age does that stop? She used to like it when I'd put her to bed, where I'd make up stories and we'd rock in the rocking chair. But look at how young that was.
Mm-hmm.
So I regret that we weren't able to find, even though we attended sports, or I took her to dance and sewed her ballet shoes and all that, it still wasn't play. It wasn't just free play. So I never had that as a child. So that was one thing I wanted to correct that I'd failed to correct. I regret that I was critical sometimes, or probably pushed her too hard. Maybe I told her she's alone too soon, that I worry about that. As a middle school kid, do you need to hear you're going to be alone in the world? I don't know. Believe it or not, we are just starting to have more high school conversations. When she was here over Christmas, she's like putting makeup on me and I'm letting her. I'm not pushing her away and saying,
oh, so yeah, having those moments.
Oh, we never had these moments. She's asking me, never. We never had typical girly girl moments. So we're having them now, which is a little late, but better late than never, I guess.
Yeah, I was going to say, I mean, you can't go back in time, but you can certainly, change the course of the future, right? And think about, okay, today's a new day. So, talk a little bit more about, because I'd be curious, like what your day to day or your week to week relationship is like. Are you texting each other? Is there what's that correspondence like?
Oh, I'd say it's funny. We don't FaceTime. I don't know why. Maybe because we know what we look like. But we talk on the phone maybe, I don't know, once every couple weeks. And it's not long. Or we text. We're big texters. I can text her 2 or 3 times a week. Just, what are you doing? How's the job going? How's your girlfriend? I'll ask about her girlfriends. Or she'll text about dad. My husband has a medical condition now, which I think he's older than I am. So nothing life-ending or whatever. But I think we're just more in touch with each other a little bit more. But the three of us are just at a different level now. And I think there's some readiness in her, I think, that allows us to kind of grieve or rework past injuries. And maybe she feels stronger now and more independent. Her independence, that she can come back and be more clear about, that really stunk or that was really nice. She just texted me yesterday, and I can't tell you what a thrill it was, because it was one of the first times I heard and I listened and I heard. She texted me, "I miss you." So,
wow. That's great.
Yeah, it was
That's
really
amazing. Yeah. I will say, Kellie, I mean, I feel like as I've gotten older, I feel more and more just closer to my parents, right? And I'm feeling very protective of them as they get older, because I'm seeing them age, right? And so I think, that's something that I don't know, I could see happening with her, and I think maybe a lot of, people as they get older, they get the same sort of feelings towards her parents. That could be an evolution too of your relationship, where she's going to start feeling a bit more of that protective feeling, or just the deeper caring.
Yeah, I think too that, most people go in one of two branches as they get older, towards gratitude or towards bitterness. And you're more likely to go on the gratitude path if things in your life are moving rather smoothly, if you have certain ducks in a row, that you have the mental energy and mental space to let that gratitude in, particularly for your parents. So it sounds like that's where she's headed.
Up next, Joey and Ed talked with Unrelating about their unique relationship challenges, how they deal with their disagreements, and where they see themselves going in the future.
My parents had just celebrated last week their 49 wedding anniversary, 49th. And one thing that they say all the time is your partner's going to annoy the shit out of you a lot. And if you can't tolerate that, if you can't see that that's just part of a relationship, if you're going to be with someone that long for 8 years, you're going to have moments where you are annoyed or upset or frustrated or irritated. There are people, when people can't tolerate that that's a piece of being in a relationship, that's where a lot of people get into trouble, because I think it goes back to that fairy tale. Like, if you're thinking there shouldn't be any conflict in my relationship, then you're setting yourself up for failure, I think.
Yeah. I actually told one of my friends the other time, because he's never been in a relationship. And he was like, we were talking about relationships. And I told him, after like a while, when I started dating a lot of people, I started dating people based on like the stuff I didn't like about them, which was like a really, really weird concept, because people always think about, oh, what are the things that you like about the person? But I'm like, yeah, that's easy to identify, because obviously like the things that you like is the things you like, but the things that you don't like are those things that you can deal with for a long period of time. Like, obviously I have a lot of like red flags and like barriers of like, this is something I'm not okay with dealing with for a long period of time. But like, Joey's late a lot, and that's something that I can kind of manage and deal with in a long period of time. But
I've gotten better.
He has gotten better. Yeah. But I think that's a good point too. I think it's just, people don't focus on like the bad things, and when they start dating people, they don't think about like, what are the things about them that you don't like, and can you manage that from like a long extended period of time?
I think a lot of people, they're so focused on what things should be, and their idea of that is so off base that, I don't know, it's setting yourself up for disappointment. And I'm talking from a place of, thinking not just relationships, but like expectations of self and your abilities and stuff like that. That's one thing that I've recently learned, is how skewed some of those ideas have been, and it's not easy to rewrite. It's part of the learning period of understanding other people's weaknesses is understanding your views as well, and your expectations, and how founded they are, what they're founded in.
Yeah, like, what is this? How is this about you, and not just about the other person?
Mm-hmm. I think we're both very self-aware. At least I'd like to think so.
Moving forward, do you see any challenges on the horizon? In terms of career, relationship, in terms of like where you guys are now and versus where you want to be in the future? Do you talk about that?
All of those things, really.
Yeah, we do try to stay present, but sometimes we do try to talk about like things that are upcoming. I will say, because we're so present focused, that I think we don't really talk about the future as much as we could, but we do still. But I think conflicts wise, I can't.
I think we, taking the honesty for it, I do think I know to expect that we are going to have problems at the next hurdle, whatever that is. If that's adopting, if that's getting married, if that's owning property, if we can. Yeah, like we're working through it, but there are going to be rough patches, I'm sure. But again, we'll deal with it until we can't, I guess.
Yeah. Or one of us dies.
Oh yeah.
we probably get something happens where we can't anymore.
Yeah.
When I used to see a therapist years ago, I mentioned her earlier, but she always just tell me I wasn't being present, and I tended to always think about the future. What's next? What's next? What's next? What can I do? And I wasn't being in the moment. And she kept telling me that. And I finally one day it clicked, and I realized what she was talking about. And it really changed my entire perspective on life. So you just kind of reminded me of that, Ed, when you mentioned being present.
And I have a really hard time with that too. I think I'm a lot better at being present in the relationship than I am in my personal life, to be quite honest with you. But I mean, I think we've talked about like that too, like having kids and getting a place that we own and stuff like that. Yeah. So
it's about making those things present eventually.
Yeah, it's like finding the balance of like, what do we need to do right now to eventually get to that goal?
It also takes a lot of energy. So I have to admit that I have a battery and it runs out for some of these things. And I'm just like, then I need to zone.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because they're heavy subjects and they take a lot of emotion and emotional and mental fortitude to really address.
Joey's going to nap after this.
Probably.
For like 2 hours.
Next up, we talk with Ken and Lenie about what has and hasn't worked for them over their long and successful marriage. On the topic of expectations, in my mind, and this is where you can help me and help our audience. In my mind, I have these expectations of where my wife and I will be in 20 years. And what I mean by that is, like, will we be retired? Will we be living in another state? Will we have kids who are, going to school or college at that point? But in my mind, I had these expectations, and I'm trying to align my expectations with my wife's. And sometimes they don't always align, right? You talked about compatibility, you talked about values, but in my mind, I have this vision of where we will be in 20 years and where I hope we will be. Is it asking too much to have those expectations, especially?
Number one, it's not asking too much to have expectations. I think anybody with half a brain is going to have expectations. The problem is if your expectations and hers are very different. And then at that point, that's when your magic word compromise comes in. Or you figure out ways so that what are most important to you and what are most important to her can work. If they're very, very different, and if there are certain basics that you don't agree on, like you said you don't have children, and I don't know how old you are, and maybe you're not in the part of your life where you'd want to start a family now. If you have a couple where the husband wants kids and the wife doesn't, or vice versa, I can't see that that's particularly reconcilable. I just can't see something as basic as that. But if you're talking about a situation where one of the spouses wants to travel and the other one doesn't, and I mean, if one of them really doesn't want to, then let that one stay home and make other plans, and the one who wants to travel, get a buddy to go travel with. It depends on how essential those factors are.
That is such a great word. And we do plan an episode in the future that does talk about what is a deal breaker and what isn't a deal breaker. And that word essential is perfect.
And I'm a nitty gritty person. My wife is not extravagant, which I greatly appreciate. Sometimes I have to encourage her to buy herself something. But all I could say to the younger generation is save your money, put away as much as you can afford to while still enjoying your life now. And also work. Whenever I talk to somebody who's younger, I said, you have to really like your work. If you hate what you're doing, life isn't really great. You have to find something that you can, I'm not saying necessarily a passion, but maybe it is a passion, where you like what you're doing. You can maybe make a living at it, hopefully, and you got to save, put it away, find a financial planner, be able to live now and live in the future at the same time, and save some, spend some, maybe donate some.
But as far as the relationship is concerned, if you don't both share that value, one is extravagant, the other one is pecunious, just doesn't want to spend a penny, you got a problem there. And those people might need to, I imagine that a couple like that would need to go for counseling if their marriage meant a lot to them. So that they could figure things out.
Maybe in my case, I spend maybe too much time thinking about the future, and my wife maybe doesn't worry about it as much, and that's great. I mean, I think that's I think they both work, but maybe it's a male
Is it
thing
thinking or is it worrying?
Such a good question.
There's a distinction there. I said, are you thinking about the future or are you worrying about the future? Because there's a distinction there.
Ken, is that a male trait? I don't know. Do we overthink?
I'm somewhat driven that way because I grew up. We were grew up very modest with a widowed mother, and we didn't inherit wealth, so we had to always think, what can I do? And I worked for companies for years that actually had pretty good benefits. I had a 401k and I had a pension, and pensions are unheard of. So what it comes down to is take advantage of what you can from wherever you're working. And if that isn't going to be enough, you talk to somebody when you're young, get a financial planner and get into some index funds or whatever it is. Very specifically, I just think do what you can to save for your future.
He wants to know if it's a male trait.
I think as a hunter-gatherer gene or whatever you want to call it, I go shopping. I worry about the money. I pay the bills. And I think about that stuff, and I worry about it, and I think about it, and yeah, I guess maybe it is a male trait in some instances. I'm not saying it's exclusive to us, but I'm thinking that my wife would rather let me deal with that stuff, and then I try to make sure she's involved enough that she has a big picture, even if she doesn't care about all the nitty gritty, and I think that's important.
Well,
it's a joint project.
I don't want you to think I'm some kind of a ninny. For years, I'm the one who paid the bills. It's not a function of who physically writes the checks or now who physically punches the information into the computer. It's just Ken is far more talented than I when it comes to understanding the financial world. When we meet with our financial planner, Ken is the one who's got the ideas. And I'm the one who sits and has to have the information explained to me. It's just, that's not my area. I got other areas, but that's not one of them. And I don't think that's sex linked. I think it's just the way I am.
Individualized.
Yeah.
I think it's
The only thing that is sex linked is the size of your television. Because men want great big TVs. And women don't care so much.
That's true.
We were having a conversation about that earlier today.
Bigger, better.
That's right. Guys are Tim Allen when it comes to the size of the television. That's a Y chromosome.
Oh, that's funny.
And finally, we sat down with Gavin about losing his father and how he was able to handle the slow decline and finally say goodbye.
Whenever you have someone in your life who has any kind of slow or progressive cognitive decline, it's that push-pull. It's like, it fucking sucks to watch it happen and have it be a slow process. But at the same time, you highlight kind of the gift you get by being able to have more time. And maybe later we can talk about what to do moving forward when you have the time, or you deliberately make the time to talk to your aging parents about the things you want to say before they're gone.
Yeah. We did. It was nice in that kind of, like in a melancholy, but like, you want to do it, but it's also like, it's, you're kind of saying goodbye in a way before you can't. And it's really sad to go through. And then he, like I said, I don't know if he kind of was like, he knew that we kind of were having a talk just to like remember things and like, hey, Dad, you told me that story a long time ago. Do you remember that story you told me about whatever it may be back in, way before I was born? And he'd tell me, and I'd try to try obviously to take it all in, as much as I could and remember everything and even like write stuff down if I remembered to. And cause sadly I didn't know if I wouldn't hear that story again or something, and so it was really sad. And my sister also knew obviously all this, everything that was happening. So she was really good with coming to visit and also even over the phone, asking my mom mostly. My dad was never good on the phone anyway. So it's like, you're like, hello. Okay. And you're like, all right, good talk. So, and he was the best, hilarious, like his dry sense of humor and it's so funny. And, but not exactly the most like, hey, everybody, like go out, like that. So so my sister would take all that down, and she is literally like the family historian. She like documented every story. And I just, like I said, I have most of it in my mind, but a lot of it, and if I can't remember something that I know he said or something, I just call her up and I say, what is that? Dad said something silly about a guy in medical school 60 years ago. And she'd be like, oh yeah, doctors. And I'm like, okay, I don't know how she's like, let me just go through my files here and I'll find it all figured out. And I'm like, so she's the family historian. So that's good. But I try to remember, obviously, as we both got older, my dad and I remember everything I could and take note of it, that just in case, this might not come up again.
You mentioned your sister. How did how did the whole family kind of deal with this? Was it dealt differently, and was there some synergy in terms of like, okay, handling different tasks and sort of dealing with, sort of just kind of managing, this whole process?
Yeah, we both. Well, again, since my brother wasn't really around for most of this, part of his, kind of mind deteriorating in that way, my sister and I, we connected and said, because especially it was good since I was here, I could take care of that kind of, I don't know if you call it day to day, because, it wasn't like a scheduled, okay, we do this today. We did, but if anything popped up, obviously I was here, which was good. And then she could come in and she would ask me, what's going on? Should I do something else? Whatever she could do, obviously, to help from California, she would do. And so, yeah, it was kind of it's a team effort, I'd say. And then it just, depending on what the subject of the bad or the good, we would do whatever we could do and to help him out and help my mom out. And, there's almost no, I wish we could have done this or we should have done. It's like, I think we did a good job. So now with him being gone and it's always going to be sad, but it was years ago, a few, years back. I don't think we have any thing sad to say about what we could have done. And there's the other thing is we're no animosity between any of us being like, you screwed that up, we should have done this. So everybody's fine that way, which is amazing. For again, obvious reasons that you want to be in the relationships still great and love each other. So that's good for us. We lucked out.
Because I can see a world where that does happen with families where there is conflict. It's like, you see you see it in TV shows and movies, and but it is common, I think, to families to struggle with this kind of process. And I would hope that in my family, when it comes to that, we're going to be hopefully on the same page.
Right.
Well, I would recommend talking about it beforehand, because that's where a lot of the conflict comes is people make assumptions or they take on roles and then resent those roles. Or, everyone kind of has this unspoken feeling about things. So.
Right. Like I thought it's not my problem. I thought you were going to do it. And you're like, then everybody's mad at each other. And then you also can forget, like, well, we have to stop being mad. This is not about us being mad at each other right now. We got to forget it. We can be mad at each other later. Hopefully we won't. We have to make sure he's okay and make sure, this is stupid to be bitching and moaning about it with each other. We all love each other, and let's just put that aside.
Although I would also say that sometimes when people don't talk about it ahead of time or have clear rules, instead of grieving what's happening and, collectively, feeling the loss, you channel it into your conflict with other people.
Yeah.
And, that's one way to get out the pain that you're feeling. It's more tangible. And so to remind people that it's probably not about the fight you're having with your sibling. It's probably that you're just really sad about the situation.
So that's just a few of the many great conversations we've had on Unrelating. Next Wednesday, we'll be airing a special New Year's Day episode about non-New Year's resolutions, which you don't want to miss. Happy holidays. If you're struggling with family, friends, or coworkers, in a bad relationship and wondering what to do, or you want a relationship and to set yourself up for success, then we want to talk to you. So make your appointment on Unrelating. To be a guest, ask a question, or recommend a topic, drop us an email at theunrelatingpodcast@gmail.com. And be sure to follow us on Instagram or Facebook.